In his emotional rant, Vusi Thembekwayo blames the government for the country's current economic state. He directs his anger toward politicians, swearing at them for the role he says they've played.
This is the impact of your stupidity over the past 26 years. You did this. Because if you had built a country that was inclusive with an economy that was growing, we could have survived. But you guys were too busy making sure that you're eating at the trough, making sure that your pockets aligned, making sure that your deals made sense, making sure that you build yourself your homesteads. That's what you guys were busy doing. And for the Neanderthals on the other side of the debate, on the opposition side, you were too busy trying to earn votes.
We have Vusi in studio today in conversation with IQ Business CEO Adam Craker.
So Vusi, it's great to get together and have an opportunity to talk. Are you open to having a no holds barred, no impediments conversation?
Yeah, let's do
today?
it.
So shall we demask
Sure.
and at least we can then, we're socially distanced and unless we come to blows and walk across the floor, but I doubt that very much. Looking at the video of your, if I may say so, it was quite a rant, but a very emotional engagement. As you walked around your next door neighbour's office environment, what really was going through your mind then and now? What are your views on what you experience at the moment in this economic crisis?
Yeah, thanks for having me here, Adam. I appreciate it. I think one of the things we forget is that behind every integer in a statistic, there's a human life. And behind every human life, there is a 24-hour existential experience. And that there are loved ones, and there is a family, there are people with hopes and dreams, right? And I think, so for me, what really infuriated me walking through that office was remembering the people who occupied those chairs. Remembering the laughs they shared, remembering the time they spent in the cafeteria, remembering the times I walked into the office and the smokers were kind of standing, as they do, huddled in a smoker corner at 7:45, trying to get their last puff in before the start of the day. Those are, I think, are the things we forget. And so we talk about the impact of the lockdown. In my mind, I'm very vocal about the lethargy we've seen, in particular from government, to address what have been very pressing issues at the moment. And I think for me, that's really what drove the frustration. And then just finally, that politicians don't seem to have a holy grail, that they don't seem to understand there are some things about which we cannot afford politics. So for instance, the morning of the rant, there was a political party that had made a statement and released the statement saying that we should revert back to level 5. And in my mind, I just thought, you have to really be disconnected from reality to make that kind of proclamation in these economic times.
So we've all become expert, I guess, in the last 4 months in this duality of the imperatives of saving lives and safeguarding livelihoods. Do you think that we are emphasizing too much on the former versus the latter? You know, how do we get the balance right between the lockdown flattening the infection curve and the dramatic, the catastrophic impact that you're seeing on the economy?
So my own view, and it's my view, is that those are false comparisons. I think there is no value to the human life. And so the idea that there is an acceptable loss of human life that can correlate with an acceptable loss of attrition in the economy is a fallacious conversation in the first place. So it goes without saying that we should do the best we can to minimize loss of life. But the word selection here is very important. It's not eliminate, it's minimize. The virus is here, and unfortunately, people will lose their lives. I think the balancing act from a leadership perspective is not whether or not there'll be a loss of life, but actually it's whether or not we as a country and our leaders in the state will do everything in their power to prevent a loss of life. Now, it has to be everything in their power that is reasonable, and that allows people the opportunity to maintain their dignity. And that's a part of the conversation I've not heard. I've not heard people talk about the dignity of a mom or a dad who provides for his or her family. I come from a single income household. My father was brutally murdered when I was 13 years old. My mother raised us. So when my mom tells me that people she was working with have been retrenched, it deeply embeds for me what would have been the case for me if I was going through high school and mom all of a sudden lost her job, right? So I think we're overlaying the health crisis with what will be people's inability now to earn an income. And that's definitely worse than what would have otherwise been the case.
So we have a unique set of circumstances in the South African context.
Yeah.
And I often hear that we are comparing ourselves to the approach that's being taken in the UK or in Australia, New Zealand, hopefully not in the US, because that really is unfolding in a very difficult way.
Yeah.
What do you think are some of those local nuances and differences that we have in South Africa that needs a unique response in terms of how we deal with the crises?
So my own life, I think, is probably a reflection of some of the fault lines we live in South Africa. And I think I'm fortunate in the sense that I kind of get to straddle different realities. And so I'm able to see and peek over the proverbial wall, what we in the township call the stop nonsense, to see what's on the other side of the fence. So clearly one of the fault lines in South Africa is inequality. It's deeply embedded and it continues to fester. And that inequality exists not only around economic opportunities, but it also exists around geographic dispersion, right? Because both of those amplify. So where you're born in South Africa has a big part to do with the trajectory your life is likely to follow economically. Then you overlay that with the gender issue and the parity that presents. You overlay that with the race issue and the legacy that carries and how that means going forward. And amongst all of this, you throw in this, sort of salad, if you will, the issues we've suffered around corruption and the issues we've suffered around several economic policies at a macro level that have been, in my mind, and I'm very vocal about this, have, in my mind, eroded some of the economic potential that we had. All of these have created where we are now. And I think the issues are, so let me just say this, Adam, the issues are complex. And one of the things that worries me about South Africans today is our default to simple explanations for complex issues. So for instance, there's some things Vusi can say, but if you said them, who you are becomes more important than what you said. And I think until we deal with that, the idea that it's actually the idea, it's the insight that's more important, we're not going to move beyond the challenges we face today.
So let's do that. Let's try, I guess, as from an IQ business perspective, we seek to be a challenger brand.
Yeah.
We're not afraid of controversy.
Yeah.
We're not afraid of running towards a problem in order to tackle or deal with that problem. You made some statements there that really triggered thoughts for me as I consider in the South African context. Personally, I've been here for 23 years, having decided to make South Africa my home and the home for my family. And we love this environment, we love the situation. But I believe that the race issue will be overcome way ahead of the gender issue in South Africa. And I also believe that what you're saying about the corruption cycle, and I was listening to Banang Mahale once again saying the 10 wasted years that we've had, that we really need to respond to. And I really align with some of the statements that you made around holding government accountable for the environment and the situation that we are building in South Africa. What do you believe needs to change? Where are the priorities? How do we get to move forward and reverse those 10 wasted years in our economy?
It's a tough one. So let me just say that I think one of the things we have to recognize is that the overwhelming majority of the people with whom we share a citizenry identity, born in the same country as you and I, who are citizens of this country, don't live in the same reality we do. For the overwhelming majority of South Africans, they continue to live in a country that is a third world in its material respects, right? And if you don't address that you drive on a highway in Cape Town, and on the one end of the highway is a very different reality to the other end, then you're consistently going to have these issues festering in terms of our politics and how we do politics in South Africa. That's an important point to make, because what people who, in my mind, with good intent, want to have a rebuilt South Africa often overlook is precisely that issue, that you can't argue for a singular identity unless you're arguing for a similar lived experience. So you kind of have to, have a parity. This is the way we're going to do it. And then I also think that, I think that we need where we are. I think that we need this crisis.
Right.
I think we need this crisis to wake us up to what's happening across the barricade. Because a lot of us have been very happy to have the, holiday in one part of South Africa, holiday overseas. I work, I earn my income. And what we've done is we've built our societies based on our incomes. So you live in a gated estate. There's a crime problem, you put a voltage over the wall. There's a public health problem, you get private medical health insurance. There's a transportation problem, you buy your own car, right? A lot of us have opted out of the realities of many of our fellow South Africans. Now, until we, and this is an important point, opt in, it's not going to fix itself. So when you're talking about corruption, but you're not opted into the system, you're actually a part of the problem. The corruption continues, festers, and becomes pervasive because you and I are making it them. It's their problem. They're the ones that are corrupt. It's their issue to fix. It really just isn't. It's actually our problem. And until we can take to the streets over an issue like corruption, it's going to continue to be a problem, and it'll divide us.
Now, I want to come back to this, the issue of never waste a good crisis.
Yeah.
That I think there's real value in us together engaging on what can be done in this situation. I want to just go back first, though, to your rant, to the situation that you illustrated so well. I'd love to understand. You must have had quite a reaction to that from far and wide, because it really did trend on social media and on broadcast media as well in terms of coverage that was there. What sort of reactions? What examples of reactions have you had?
Overwhelmingly, and I'd say kind of 9 out of 10 has been people saying thank you. Thank you for finally saying it. There is, I'm not sure why, but there is a big contingent of our citizenry that feels silenced, that feels like they can't say certain things. Now, I don't believe you and I have to agree, but I do believe that my most important responsibility as an active citizen of South Africa is to protect your right to say the thing to which I do not agree. Right. Because there was a time when it was the other way around, right? And I think we often forget that. And so often on social media, what you're finding is if you say something, it then becomes, well, Let's look at who you are and let's dissect that. Let's leave the substance of what you're saying alone. So overwhelmingly, it was people saying, thank you for saying it. And then it was, as you might expect, the people who went, well, let's double click on who Vusi is. And so people will try and amplify something to make a particular point. So something like, why does he speak like that? He must grow up very privileged. Not the case. Almost my entire sort of high schooling experience, I was given a scholarship at the school I went to because I was academically gifted. My mom was a single income earner. There were 5 of us in the house. I was the middle child. I was sponsored in every single activity I did. My mom and I had a single pact. If you're going to do it, make sure you're number 1. So when I came home with an 89% average, my mom's question was always, where's the other 11%? But then I started thinking to myself, so when did a black person becoming excellent become a problem? When did that become something? So you're trying to tell me that being an excellent is such an outlier that it should be attacked? And there were people who were saying to me, well, he's excellent because he's trying to be white. And I thought to myself, well, that's a fascinating thought too, because it then infers that excellence can only be white.
Yeah.
And I think all of these are like deeply embedded, very quiet belief systems. These are the things we saying around the braais. They said around the shisanyama. It's the us, the them. And I think the reason the video went viral was because there was a moment of actually we're sharing the same thing here. So, I mean, you can attack me, but at the end of the day, the person whose desk I showed is still unemployed. Some of them phoned me, by the way. One young lady has a diploma in tourism. She'd been retrenched at the business, and she was saying to me, can you just send me some money to buy some food? And then she says to me on the phone, she says, I remember you arriving at the office every morning. Always very polite, you used to greet. She says, the government they came here to do food parcels, but the food parcels, we don't know where they ended up. So we've now reached a point where we're not just stealing money, we're stealing food. And you go, well, at some point, common sense and basic human dignity just has to rein in on this. And again, I'm just at the point where I thought, you can't be quiet anymore. You've got a voice, say something.
So I can see why. I mean, I recall the other week seeing in response to your video that several people were tweeting Vusi for president, and I particularly liked your reaction to that. Just help us understand your thoughts on that.
So, first, I'm 35 years old. I have a long growth journey ahead of me, and I'm thoroughly enjoying the process of growth I'm going through. Second, there are people in my mind far more capable, because I think it requires a certain level of maturity, a certain level of discernment, a certain level of empathy, and you've got to be at a particular life stage to be able to perform that kind of job. You referenced Bonang Mohale. I've asked him, by the way, he says, no, not interested. But that for me is the kind of guy you want in that kind of seat, right? Impeccable character, completely unimpeachable, honest, speaks his mind, forthright and deliberate. Excellent. Not black excellent, just excellent, right? So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, we as South Africans, and I suppose owing to the phenomenal legacy that Mandela left us, have had this permeating idea that there's got to be a savior to come and save us. And so most of these rock star personality politicians, whoever they are, whether they're wearing, a beret or an overall, live up to this rock star persona because they're the next messiah.
Right.
And if we know anything about developed countries, growing economies, that are pluralistic and inclusive, is that there's no rock stars.
Yeah.
The system is more important than the person. So South Africans have to learn there is no messiah. All of us, you, me, everybody, we all have to collaboratively get involved in the project of rebuilding South Africa. But there's no messiah. Vusi is definitely not it. Because every human being has shortcomings. So it really is around what is the ideology of what we want to do. who are the best people to get that done? We understand we come from a past that has been, there aren't words in the English language to explain just how diabolical it was. But we're here now. So what are we going to do? Because you and I share the same country. You know, at the end of the day, the social ills we face affect all of us. So let's leave the Messiah out of it, and let's all work together.
I think that's so important. It really strikes a chord, and I think it, in particular, strikes a chord with our team at IQ Business. We often talk about the fact that we are the leaders that we have been waiting for. That kind
I
of
love that. Yeah.
Messiah that we actually have to play our role as citizens, as individuals, in teams and in our enterprise to use our business as a force for good, to affect change and to play our part. In your business, in your environment, I mean, clearly you have developed an enterprise that has supported many other enterprises. Take us through, just help us to understand the role that you play there and the learnings that are taking place and what's happening in the world that you operate in.
So let me just say that almost all of South Africa's problems have a race and gender tone, but the solution seekers and those crafting and implementing those solutions don't have to. And I think that's probably another lesson as South Africans we've got to learn, that it doesn't follow that because the person suffering a social ill is a particular hue, only people of a particular hue can address that ill. Actually, that's not, those two things are not correlated. So anyway, you know, I was sharing with you when we were chatting, so I come from the trade. I was in wholesale and retail. I'd had a phenomenal career working for a great business. I learned a lot about managing margins, as you do in wholesale and retail. It's all about, you know, 3% gross margin, 16% rebate, and try to build a business using that kind of 20% gross margin business. Left that, started my own business, had marginal success, and then around 2014, I get invited to be on a panel called Dragon's Den. I sat on the panel and I watched phenomenal people with great ideas come and pitch. And I watched the complexion of the people who were able to raise the funding and those who were not. Now, the issue had a very clear race skew. But what was interesting is 4 out of the 5 dragons were black. Right. So I thought to myself, well, it's pretty clear that there's a problem here. And the actual problem, which is what I've been trying to do for, you know, close on, what's it been, 7 years now, has been how do you enable the person who comes from a background where they don't understand the tenets of commerce to build a commercial enterprise? Now, they can be whatever skin color, but how do you enable them to do that, right? So the person went through a public school, they graduated maths literacy at a 33.6%, barely a rudimentary level of English, certainly not a commercial English person, but they are expected to write a business plan, put together financial projections, and raise funding. Those things are not going to happen. So when you begin to see the patterns of investment repeat themselves, it's because the system is broken. All you can do is try to fix it. So I created my venture firm. We started doing 1 or 2 investments. We learned very early on that the stuff that worked was the stuff where we handheld the entrepreneurs. So we then created an NPO, which is an education business. We put as much educational content in there as we can, and then we offered it for free to the entire entrepreneurship universe. Then we built a mentorship system called Greybeards and Wet Ears, and we connected people who are very mature with people who are trying to learn this thing about business, put them on the platform and said, grow and learn. And again, the idea, you know, we've touched over 300 businesses now, but the idea for us is just be a part of the system of good. And in being a part of that system of good, there's something on the other end of it, right? In the early days, I used my own money to invest. Very difficult, very painful. I would, you know, my wife still reminds me of that often. She says, you know, I did Robin Hood, but the wrong way around. You know, and then we raised our first fund. We're busy raising our second fund now. So I've been patient with myself and learning as well and iterating, which for me is exactly why what's happening now is so near and dear.
Right.
It's because I work every single day with the entrepreneur. I can tell you for free where they are. An average entrepreneur in South Africa today is completely over-leveraged. They've taken a second bond in their house. They've maxed out their credit card. They don't have any more savings. They've defaulted on their personal insurances. They're lucky if their kids' tuition is paid up to date, if their medical aid is up to date. And they've done that to keep the business afloat, to keep people in the job. And for me, when I see policymakers not understand the urgency of the moment, that's really what gets my blood boiling.
Yeah, I mean, it's the feeling is mutual, and that's I mean, it's such a compelling reason, I think, to step forward and to play a role. I want to come back, as I said, to this concept of not wasting the good crisis. I mean, there's no doubt we're in a crisis at this point, the worst economic crisis that South Africa has ever faced. And clearly there is a need to take significant steps to ensure that we turn the trajectory that we're currently on with the potential of heading into an economic depression at this point. What steps are you taking personally through your business, and what are you seeing in terms of the reaction and the embodiment of where there are either centres of example or excellence or activities that you applaud or want to encourage that we should be doing more of?
So, sure. So, one of the things I've noticed, which has been fascinating, has been how quickly some of the private capital has been responding to the distress we're finding in small and medium-sized businesses. That, for me, has been heartening. So you're seeing a lot of VC firms free up their dry powder. You're seeing a lot of the private equity firms free up their dry powder to give firms runway to keep going. You have to remember, at the beginning of this, we were told 21 days or 120 days in. Right. I don't know. There are large listed businesses that can't survive for months without revenues. And yet we're expecting kind of small and medium-sized businesses to do it. So I think I'm seeing that, and I think that's absolutely amazing. And then I'm seeing South Africans pull themselves into like little social clubs that try to help each other, which I think is phenomenal. Your Cobra initiative. And by the way, I would love to come on board the Cobra platform.
Fantastic.
I think it's a great initiative because I think one of the things we have to do as South Africans is have fewer but more meaningful initiatives. So it really has to be about less rock stars, more impact. How do we have one thing that we all just rally behind? And that's, for me, something that's very big. And, you know, in terms of what I'm doing in industry, we're busy with a capital raise. We had started our cap raise. We had a particular fund size. COVID hit. And then I kind of went back to our investment committee and I said, we've got to make this capital raise 5 times the size. I said, because I think we're thinking too small. So in my mind, there's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't be raising a 2.5 billion rand SMME fund. We create a portion of that SMME fund that is a tradable instrument that is listed on the exchange. The other portion, we bring in institutional investors. But if we don't do this kind of big, robust stuff, what we can't afford anymore is the little actions. That's not what's going to get us out of this. I just want to say something to the point you made earlier, that we're heading into the depression. I think in the real economy, we're already there.
Right.
That's my own personal view. And I know that the economic data doesn't bear that out. But you have to remember that in the US of the Great Depression, their unemployment peaked at 24.7%. We've been at 29% unemployment for the past 4 years. We breached the 30% level. And if you listen to a lot of the economic data that's been extrapolated, it looks like we're going to breach the 40% level by the narrow definition too. This is not socially sustainable because at some point, the voltage running on that electric wire above your wall cannot protect you when people can't find food to eat. So I'm just like, how do we all get engaged? How do we all get involved and become a part of the solution? I'm going to do it in my own little way, you know, in kind of the venture capital private equity space. But I think there's a lot that we can do. Final note. Education. And I think there are many of us South Africans who have not yet understood the role we can play in helping the state build capacity in terms of education. I think there's a huge opportunity for us to do things like what the guys at Partners for Progress have done, where they bring on board corporate expertise and they plug it into a student governing body at a public school, and you help lift the level of education being delivered there. What we know for sure is that food parcels are not going to work anymore.
Yeah.
So the idea that we can have one corporate wellness day where we all descend on Deep Slurt, you know, leave a few food parcels and go home, that's not what's going to get us out of this. I think, Adam, we have 2 years. I think we're right at the tipping point. And I think if in the next 2 years we don't turn the corner, we never will. Yeah.
Well, that's got to be a rallying cry. That's got to be a motivation, and there has to be an understanding of the need to respond and accelerate our response as individuals, as enterprises. You mentioned there about education, and clearly, as you painted a picture of your family background, your siblings, the role that your mother played, which clearly has been so pivotal.
Yeah.
And to be a single parent is with, did you say five children?
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's a handful. I was one of 4 children with a single parent, my mother, that also brought us up. There are many conversations you and I need to have, many parallels that we should...
Seems to be something about the single mother thing, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, there's definitely something there. I have to ask you, what did your mum think of your rant on video?
So, for context, my mom is a devout, staunch Roman Catholic. I reckon that if they tallied the hours that the Pope has put in, I think my mom probably hasn't pipped at the post. I really do. She is, when I was growing up, we spent, I cannot tell you how many hours at the church. So, you know, you went through First Holy Communion, then you became a confirmed Catholic, and then you got involved in all of the communal activities of Catholicism. You were involved in, every Sunday they had some sort of sale or other to raise money for the church. So you're doing that. Every Saturday was the altar servers meeting. I was an altar server. There was this church choir. My mom put me in the church choir. You know, so you have to understand that that's my mom. You also have to know that my mom is very deeply entrenched in our community. She's like the one that people gravitate to. If there's generally a problem in the community, they come to my mom to solve it, right? So she's very highly regarded. Anyway, I'm in bed sleeping. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning, you know, very quiet. The hardy-dars aren't making a noise outside. You can just hear the light whiff of wind of winter. My phone rings and it's my mom. So I thought, well, something must be wrong. So I pick up the phone and I answer the phone and she says to me, "You see, I knew it," she says. She says, "I knew you had a bit of your father in you. I absolutely knew it." She says, "I knew that your father left some of his genes in you." So I said, "What's the problem?" She said, "We'll talk about it in the morning," which is a typical my mom thing to do. She, you know, gives you the problem and then she leaves you to kind of stew over it. When we were kids, this is a true story. When we were kids, I grew up in the time when you did get a hiding if you were naughty. When we were kids, my mom would get the belt and would leave the belt with you for a few hours, just for you to marinate over the pain that you were going to feel once she, you know, administered her form of justice. So anyway, so I called my mom back and I go, what's going on? She said, "Well, everybody from the church has phoned me about your video." And I have to understand, I've got a couple of videos. I said, "Mom, what are you talking about?" She says, "The video." And she said, "But they said, we're very proud of your son. It's very, he's, clearly principled, speaks his mind. But why did he have to speak like that?" So she says, "Why did you have to speak like that?" I said, "Oh, Mom, I got caught in the moment. It's funny, isn't it, that to our parents, we're still just kids. Right?
Absolutely.
We never grow. Yeah.
Well, Vusi, well done for speaking out. I think it is so important that we all speak out. and you've really set, I think, a direction for many to be energized, to start to think themselves about what reaction they need to have, and the urgency that you've mentioned. And I think you've really emphasized that we are the leaders that we have been waiting for. It's up to us to respond. I really am encouraged that I hope we will work together on Cobra.
I'm so looking forward to it.
This conversation is going to build, and there are many things that we can do together. So Vusi, thank you so much for joining us at IQ Business for this conversation. Really appreciate it.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So I kind of just remembered an experience, and I wanted to share it with you and to the good family here at IQ Business. So I had the privilege of meeting Madiba. And I was 17 the first time I'd met him. I just won the World Championship in public speaking. Mom sent me off to go and meet him in my full school uniform during school holidays. We've already discussed my mom. So, I don't have any street cred because of mom. So anyway, the day arrives, I go meet Nelson Mandela. 4 taxis later, I arrive at his office in Houghton. And, I met at reception. Zelda Lachranji comes to meet me, takes me to the study. I sit and I wait for him, and then he comes to meet me. He says, Madiba, right? Wow. Chest is pounding. Every orifice in your body is sweating. You're in the moment. Invites me to sit down. And my mom sent me to the meeting with 3 instructions. She said, look smart, sound intelligent, don't embarrass me. Kind of what I've tried to do here, right? So anyway, and I decided the only way to do this was if I said nothing, but if I just asked really good questions. So I'd really prepped for the meeting, had tons of questions. It's the end of the hour, knock at the door, a peek. And it's Zelda's, kind of sign to say, you've got other commitments. So Madiba looks at me and he says, they said you're a speaker. And I said, yeah, what data? Which is Xhosa for granddad. He says, but man, you have not spoken. Then he says to me, which I want to leave this with, with the family here. He says, have you got any final questions for me? So I asked him, I said, Tata, what is your dream for South Africa? He said, South Africans need a little bit of faith. So I said, what is faith? He said, faith is the ability to see the invisible, to believe in the impossible, and to trust in the unknown. And I think that there's going to be a barrage of negative news, media, sentiment. It's going to exploit our fault lines. But I think as South Africans, we always need to default to what makes us who we are, that we are a people who have a faith in their country. Thanks,
Fantastic. Thanks, Vusi. What a great way to finish. Thanks very much. Back to you, Thembekwayo.
Certainly lots to think about from that conversation. Adam, Vusi, thank you both. After the break, Adam will be presenting the IQ Business Promotions.